It was just a normal evening. The kind of evening where everything seemed perfectly ordinary on the surface. But as I walked through the door, everything in my life began to shatter. I had no idea what was about to hit me. My wife, Sarah, was sitting at the kitchen table when I came home from work. She looked different, like she was waiting for something, or maybe someone. Her face, usually full of warmth and love, was cold, expressionless, like a mask. She hadn't even looked up when I came in, which wasn't like her at all. I dropped my keys on the counter, expecting a "Hey, how was your day?" or some sort of greeting. But nothing. Silence. "Sarah?" I called out, stepping closer to her. She didn't respond at first. It was almost as if she was lost in thought, or maybe, rehearsing something. I felt an unease creep up my spine, the kind that tells you something's wrong before you can even put your finger on it. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes red, as though she'd been crying. A knot tightened in my stomach. Was she okay? What had happened? Then she spoke. And the words that came out of her mouth were not what I was prepared to hear. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "It's about what I've done." My heart skipped a beat. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing down on me as if the weight of her words was already sinking in. I felt my throat tighten, unable to speak. Was she sick? Had something happened to her? My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them could have prepared me for what came next. "I've been seeing someone else," she whispered, almost as if she was afraid to say it aloud. "I've been having an affair." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze. My brain couldn't process what she had just said. Affair? What was she talking about? Her face was a mixture of guilt and sadness, as though she regretted saying it, but at the same time, it had been eating away at her for so long that she just couldn't hold it in any longer. My chest tightened. My legs felt weak, like I might collapse at any moment. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "How long?" was all I could manage to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. "A few months," she replied, her eyes filling with tears. "It started with small things, casual talks at work. And then, one thing led to another." I stared at her in disbelief. A few months? The thought of her being with someone else, betraying me in ways I couldn't even imagine, felt like a cold knife twisting in my heart. My mind raced. I wanted to scream. To throw something. To demand answers. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her, my mind reeling. "How could you?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice cracking under the weight of the question. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "It just did. And I know I've ruined everything, but I can't keep hiding it. I'm so sorry." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Who was he? Why him? Why did she feel the need to betray me? But there was no space to form those questions, not yet. I needed answers, but more than anything, I needed time to breathe, to think, to understand what the hell was going on. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my world beginning to spiral out of control. I looked at her, desperate for something, anything, that could make sense of this mess. But I knew in that moment, nothing was going to make sense again. And just as I was about to speak, to demand the truth, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text message. My mind, still consumed with Sarah's confession, barely registered it at first. But then I saw the name. It was from an anonymous number. The text read, "You don't know the whole story yet. Your wife's affair is only the beginning." The message hit me like a ton of bricks, as if the universe was pushing me to dive deeper into this nightmare I couldn't wake up from. What else was there? What else had she done? As the weight of the words sank in, one thing became clear: this was only the beginning of a story I wasn't ready to face. The confession was just the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't until hours later, after Sarah had finished telling me about the affair, that the truth began to sink in. My mind couldn't quite wrap itself around it. Every word she spoke seemed to echo in my brain, each one more painful than the last. But it wasn't just her affair I was grappling with, it was the realization that I had been living a lie. Our entire relationship, everything I thought I knew about our life together, seemed to be crumbling. If she had been able to hide something like this from me for months, what else was she hiding? What else had I missed? As I sat there, still trying to process her confession, my thoughts kept circling back to that anonymous text. The message had been so cryptic, so ominous, you don't know the whole story yet. Your wife's affair is only the beginning. What did that mean? Who had sent it? And most importantly, why? I wasn't sure how long I had been sitting there, lost in my thoughts, before Sarah finally spoke again. Her voice, shaky and uncertain, broke through the silence. I know you must have a lot of questions, she said, her hands wringing nervously in her lap. And I don't know where to start. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. I looked at her, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. What could I say? The woman I had trusted with everything had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I had given her my heart, and she had thrown it away. I didn't know who she was anymore. It was clear that Sarah was trying to explain herself, trying to give me the reasons behind her actions, but none of it mattered. None of it made the pain go away. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. And then, as if on cue, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a phone call. I glanced at the screen, no name, just an anonymous number. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be the same person who had sent the text? Was someone out there trying to make sure I knew everything, or were they just playing games? I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the phone for a moment, my pulse racing. Every fiber of my being screamed to answer it, to find out who was behind this, to understand the deeper truth that had been hidden from me. But I couldn't bring myself to pick up. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared to hear more about the lie that had shattered my world. Sarah must have noticed my hesitation, because she spoke again, her voice quiet and fragile. Is everything okay? She asked, her eyes searching mine for any sign of reassurance, but I had none to give her. I don't know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to think anymore. She nodded, the tears streaming down her face as if all the weight of her guilt and shame had finally caught up to her. I never meant for any of this to happen. I got lost, and I made some bad choices. I didn't know how to respond. How could I? How do you find the words to make sense of something like this? I stood up, pacing the kitchen, trying to get control of my thoughts. The pain was suffocating, but I couldn't sit there forever, not while so many questions were left unanswered. What had pushed Sarah to do this? Who was this man, this colleague she had been seeing? And what about the anonymous text? What was going on? I needed answers. I had to know the truth. I had to understand the full extent of the betrayal I had been living with. But first, I needed to get out of that house. I can't talk to you right now, I said, my voice hardening. I need some space. I need to think. Sarah nodded, understanding. I get it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I left without another word, stepping out into the cold night air. It was a relief to be away from the house, from Sarah's apologetic eyes and the suffocating weight of her guilt. But as soon as I was in the car, my thoughts returned to that phone call. I had to answer it. I pulled the phone from my pocket, my hands trembling as I swiped to accept the call. The voice on the other end was low, distorted, as if the caller was trying to hide their identity. You're probably wondering why I'm calling, the voice said, sending a shiver down my spine. I didn't answer. I couldn't find the words. But my heart was pounding, the silence between us growing more suffocating with each passing second. "I'm the one who sent you the text," the voice continued. "And I'm the one who's going to tell you everything you need to know about your wife." I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse quickening. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you know?" "You'll find out soon enough," the voice replied. "Just know this, your wife's affair is the least of your worries." The call ended abruptly. My mind was racing. What did that mean? Who was this person? How did they know so much? And what was coming next? I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my head, but my thoughts kept returning to that chilling conversation. The anonymous caller had made it clear that there was more to this story than I could imagine. And now, I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. But what was I really up against? What was I about to discover? The night was just beginning, and it was clear, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The drive had done little to ease my mind. If anything, it had only heightened my sense of urgency. The moment I returned home, I knew that things would never be the same. The weight of the revelation that Sarah had been cheating still hung heavily in the air. But there was something deeper, a feeling that I was only scratching the surface of a far more complicated truth. I couldn't stop thinking about that anonymous phone call. The words echoed in my head, "Your wife's affair is the least of your worries." What did that mean? Who had sent it? Was it someone trying to manipulate me? Or was there something darker lurking just beneath the surface of Sarah's betrayal? When I entered the house, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her face pale, as though she had been waiting for me, knowing this moment was inevitable. Her eyes met mine, and there was nothing left to say. The apology, the tears, none of it would take back what had happened. She looked at me helplessly. "I don't know what you want me to say, but I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I didn't respond immediately. I didn't have the strength to. Instead, I pulled out my phone and stared at it. The voice of the anonymous caller replayed in my mind over and over again. They had promised to reveal the truth, so why hadn't they called back? What was the truth they had been talking about? Suddenly, the phone rang again. I looked at the screen, and there it was, no caller ID. Without hesitation, I answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling with anticipation. The voice on the other end was low, but this time, there was no distortion. It was clear, almost eerily calm. "You're ready for the truth now, aren't you?" the voice asked, and my heart skipped a beat. "What do you know about my wife?" I demanded, my voice louder than I had intended. The voice chuckled softly, a cruel, knowing sound. "I know everything. I know more than you think. You're not going to like what you hear, but you need to hear it." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Tell me. What is it?" The voice paused for a long moment before continuing, the words hanging heavy in the silence between us. "Your wife's affair. It wasn't just some random fling. It was orchestrated, planned. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the man she was seeing." I froze, unable to breathe. Was it someone I knew? Someone close to me? The man she was sleeping with? The voice continued. "He's someone who's been in your life for years. Someone who you trust, your best friend." The world tilted on its axis. I felt the ground beneath me shift as if I were losing my grip on reality. "No," I whispered, barely able to form the word. My mind raced, searching for a name, any name that could fit. But my best friend? No. It couldn't be. It had to be a lie. It had to be some twisted game. But then the voice gave me a name. Tom. Tom was my best friend. He was the guy I'd known since college, the one who had stood by me through thick and thin, the one who had been there for every major milestone in my life. The one who had been at our wedding, celebrating with us. Tom had always been like a brother to me. But now, everything had changed. The man I had trusted with my life was the one who had betrayed me the most. Tom. I whispered, the name tasting like poison on my tongue. Yes, the voice said. Tom has been seeing your wife for months. He's the one who's been sleeping with her. They've been planning this for a while now. The words hit me like a freight train. I felt lightheaded, my hands shaking as I struggled to comprehend what I was hearing. This wasn't just some random affair, it was a calculated betrayal. My best friend had been involved from the beginning. And Sarah? She had gone along with it. The silence stretched between us, but the voice on the other end wasn't finished. There's more, the voice said, this time with a cold satisfaction in their tone. Tom isn't the only one involved. Sarah had been seeing other men too. It's all part of a bigger plan, one that you've been completely blind to. I couldn't take it anymore. Stop. Stop right there, I demanded, my voice breaking. I don't want to hear anymore. Just tell me who you are. Why are you doing this to me? The voice didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, there was only silence. I could feel my pulse racing, my vision blurring as I tried to make sense of everything I had just been told. Finally, the voice spoke again, but this time, there was a strange sense of finality in their words. Because you deserve the truth, they said. You deserve to know what's been going on behind your back. You've been living in a lie for too long. And with that, the line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, trying to process everything I had just learned. Tom, my best friend, had been involved in the affair with my wife. And worse, there were more people involved, more lies, more secrets. My life, everything I thought I knew about my relationship, had been built on a foundation of lies. I turned to Sarah, who had been watching me in silence, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I could see the fear in them now. Fear not just of my reaction, but of something else, something deeper. Is it true? I asked, my voice hollow. Is it true that you've been seeing Tom? That you've been sleeping with him behind my back? Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then, her shoulders slumped, and she nodded, her eyes brimming with regret. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's true. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop. The world around me felt like it was crumbling. The two people I had trusted most in my life, the people I had loved unconditionally, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And just like that, everything had changed. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as I stood there, staring at Sarah. Her face, once a source of comfort, now looked like a stranger's, someone I could no longer recognize. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, a deafening rush of blood that made everything else seem distant, almost unreal. Tom. My best friend. The one person I never would have suspected. It was all too much to process. The room felt suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in on me. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on my chest, each revelation heavier than the last. Sarah's sobs filled the silence, but they didn't reach me. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, spinning faster and faster, crashing into one another. How could they do this to me? To us? Please, say something, Sarah whispered through her tears. She reached out, her hand trembling, but I instinctively stepped back. My entire body seemed to reject the contact. Say something. I repeated, my voice raw, barely above a whisper. What do you want me to say, Sarah? Do you want me to say it's okay? That I forgive you? Because I can't. I can't even begin to understand what's happening right now. Sarah closed her eyes, wiping away the tears that streamed down her face. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to get this far. The words were hollow. The damage was done. How could it not be? I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, my voice thick with a mixture of anger and sadness. I could feel the sting of betrayal deep in my chest, but there was also something else, something that threatened to consume me completely: disbelief. A part of me wanted to lash out, scream, demand answers. Another part of me wanted to run, to escape from the suffocating grip of this nightmare. But there was no escape from this reality. It had become my reality, and no matter how much I wished otherwise, there was no turning back. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about Sarah's betrayal. It was about everything, about trust, about the lies that had been woven into the very fabric of our relationship, about the way I had turned a blind eye to the cracks in the foundation. Was I complicit in my own betrayal by ignoring the signs? Was I so blinded by love, by the life we had built, that I had refused to acknowledge what was staring me in the face? As I turned away from Sarah, I felt a deep sense of hollow emptiness. This was the woman I had planned to grow old with. The woman I had confided in, the one I trusted more than anyone else. And yet, here I was, standing in the ruins of a marriage that had been built on lies. "Where's Tom?" I finally asked, the words coming out with a finality that felt heavy. Sarah flinched, as though the question itself had physically struck her. He's not here. I haven't seen him since that night." Her voice faltered, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt cross her face. But then she quickly looked away, as if trying to bury the shame in the depths of her own mind. "I need to talk to him," I said, turning toward the door. But Sarah's voice stopped me before I could leave. "Please, don't. I don't want you to confront him. It's not worth it." "It's over," she said, her voice low and pleading. "I'll decide what's worth it," I snapped, turning back to face her. "I need answers. I need to hear it from him. I need to know why." As I made my way to the door, Sarah called out once more. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I truly am." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The only thing that mattered now was getting to the truth, whatever it was. And if that meant confronting Tom, my best friend, then so be it. Underscore 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 underscore. The drive to Tom's place was a blur. I barely registered the passing streets, my mind consumed by the thoughts swirling in my head. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. How had it come to this? How had I not seen it? The thoughts were suffocating, and yet the more I tried to push them away, the more they piled on. When I arrived at Tom's apartment, I hesitated for just a moment. What would I say? How could I even begin to process what I was about to confront? I knocked on the door with a force that matched my emotions. There was no turning back now. Tom opened the door, his face falling when he saw me standing there. There was no denying the guilt in his eyes, the shame that seemed to hang over him like a dark cloud. He knew exactly why I was here. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice unsteady. "I need answers," I said, my voice trembling with the force of everything I had been holding back. "I need to know why." Tom shifted uncomfortably but stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. He motioned to the couch, but I ignored it, pacing the room instead. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Tom finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Everything got out of hand." "Out of hand?" I repeated, my anger rising once more. "You slept with my wife, Tom. How could you betray me like that? You were my best friend. I trusted you." Tom's face crumpled with guilt, but there was no apology that could erase what had been done. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. "I don't even deserve it. But I never meant to hurt you." For a moment, we stood there, the reality of the situation sinking in. But despite the rawness of the conversation, the words felt hollow. The damage had been done, and nothing could undo it. The years of friendship, the shared experiences, had all been shattered in an instant. "I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted, the weight of it all crashing down on me. "Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, has been turned upside down. How do I even begin to pick up the pieces?" Tom didn't have an answer. There was no answer, not really. Not for something like this. As I walked out of his apartment, I realized that I would never be the same. Neither of us would. What happened next was uncertain. Would I try to rebuild? Would I leave it all behind? The future was an empty, terrifying void, but one thing was clear: no matter what I chose, life would never be the same again. And maybe that was the point. Sometimes, the only way to find out who you really are is to face the worst of yourself, and the people you thought you knew.